Intelligent Workflows introduces automated fax data extraction and is available in desktop and web clients. It uses the built-in automated zonal OCR based on the OpenText Intelligent Capture Engine and integrates seamlessly with the existing RightFax Workflows technology. This means that administrators can effortlessly design OCR capture templates that work with any fax image within the RightFax system. This transforms inbound faxes into semi-structured files with actionable data, which accelerates and automates fax data extraction. Processed faxes can be easily found by searching for keywords in the metadata. By utilizing intelligent workflows, organizations can virtually all but eliminate manual tasks and data entry, reducing errors and improving information sharing. Workflow data can be seamlessly integrated into an EMR system or external database. For security-prone organizations, Intelligent Workflows maintains an auditable trail of each fax as it moves through the system, ensuring regulatory compliance while maintaining high security standards for sensitive information. RightFax Intelligent Workflows uses a custom image editor so you can easily define your zonal OCR fields. You can predefine data types to help improve accuracy and reliability. Templates can be reused across multiple workflows to eliminate duplicate efforts. And although not 100% accurate, handwritten fields are recognized and converted. I would always recommend defining a verification step in your workflow to confirm your data was accurately OCR'd, especially when using handwritten. Another new feature is the ability for RightFax to capture a checkbox. This feature uses advanced OCR processing to recognize and process whether checkboxes are checked or empty. This can be very helpful to organizations that leverage checkbox fields with documents like intake forms, medical histories, and other complex forms. By adding checkbox capture with zonal capture, most organizations will be able to fully capture any standard medical form. Exception handling has been updated to indicate exceptions clearly in the fax list. This is where users can now visually assess which faxes require corrected metadata with color-coded exceptions and field-level validation. Next, we'll do a demo of this enhancement and show how easily workflows can be set up within virtually any organization. Okay, so what we're seeing here now is a system that has RightFax 21.2 loaded. It is a full RightFax server, and we're going to do the demonstration on this system. So let me start by showing you the documents that we'll be faxing in. So on my C drive, under my file attachment folder, I have a couple of PDFs here. So I'm going to do two of them for the demo. I'm going to do a standard, I guess this is like a patient intake form. It has some information about a patient, the date of birth, what their treatment was, what their injury was, details about the patient, some check boxes, insurance details on the bottom. So it has a lot of data. I'll also fax in an exception. So same form actually, but I have a mistake on here on purpose. I think the date. If we look at the date field, which is over here, you're going to see it's missing some data. And that would be the date field of the, let's see. Sorry, right here, date of consultation is missing the year. So let's begin. What I'm going to do next is I'm going to bring up the RightFax client. Just so you know, this can also be done using the web client. I'm going to do the demo with the client just because it's a little quicker and it's a little easier for me to go to different folders. So first thing I'm going to do is fax in two documents. So the first one I'm going to fax in will be the standard one, and the next one will be the exception. So I'm faxing it into 917-386-5102. That is a number associated with the workflow. So any documents that are faxed into this number will be entered into that workflow. The workflow is going to look at the document. It's going to scan all the fields, and it's going to pull out the data from the fields. Once the data is pulled out from the fields, we can export it into a CSV file, an XML, import it into an external system. There's a lot of things you could do. So let's just get this going. So I'm just going to do a basic fax here. And I don't need a cover sheet on here, but I do need to choose my attachment. So here's where I'm going to pick the document. So let's do the standard one first, new patient sheet. This one's ready to go. So it has the fax number, just a name, the attachment. I'm going to send it. I'll do another one. I'll do it to the same number because I want it to go to the same workflow. Put a different doctor name on. Do Dr. Rogers. Don't need a cover sheet on here either. And this time I'll choose the one with the exception. And send. Okay, so these are being generated. These are real faxes. They're going to go out and they're going to come into the Webinar Pharmacy 1 workflow. So while we're waiting for this to be converted and sent, let me show you how I define these workflows. So go back to the Fax Manager here, and you can see under the Fax Manager there's a new field here called Workflows. Under these workflows, I'm going to go to the 3 workflows that are associated with this demonstration, which would be Webinar Pharmacy 1, Webinar Pharmacy 2, and Webinar Exception. If I right-click and I edit Webinar Pharmacy 1, you could see how I define all my fields. So what I do first is give it a title. I define what users or groups are going to have access to this workflow. So anyone in the Webinar Assistant group will have access to this workflow. So when the fax comes into this workflow, anyone in that group will have access to look at it, look at the data, edit it, maybe move it on to another workflow. And then I define all the fields. So here's all the fields: patient name, address, social security number, city, state, zip code, all the information, a lot of fields. And you'll see in a minute where I define these all and why. And then I define if they're required. Right now, I think I just made the name required. Everything else I said no, which is fine. And then action. So now I'm deciding what I want to do after this workflow is complete. So we could submit it to another workflow, which we are going to do, which is Webinar Pharmacy 2. We could do nothing. We can route it to another RightFax user. So there's a lot of different things you could do. And then there's exceptions too. So we're saying if there's an exception, something on this workflow that's not right, or the data that comes in that's not right, we're going to send it to a different workflow. So if I'm going to hit cancel. Now, if I right click on here and hit automate, you'll see how I define the fields here, the OCR fields. So as you can see, these little blue boxes are surrounding the fields that I defined to OCR. So for example, let me pick one here. Let's take insured's name. So if I go down to in name of insurer or insured's name here, let's see, insured name, I can actually clear it. So I can unmark it. And you'll notice that that field now is not highlighted anymore. The blue box is gone. If I want to put it back again, I could say mark zone. I put my cursor around it. I like to do it a little larger than the field if I can. Not too big because I don't want to get in the way. Now anything that's in this field will be OCR'd. And now it's back. So I could say save. So these are all the fields that it's going to do zonal OCR. And so as this fax comes in, it's going to know that the date of consultation here, it's going to look for anything in this field here, move it to the corresponding field, which would be the date of consultation, which is right here, date of consultation. So it'll actually move it there. So I'm going to save it, close it, and let's see if our faxes are done yet. They are. Perfect. So now, since I sent them both to this number, they're both going to show up in this Webinar Pharmacy 1. And there they are. Perfect. So let's take a look at what we got. So the first one that came in at 503 was the one that didn't have the exception. So let's take a look. So I'm going to double click on it. Okay, so the fax came in and it looks pretty good. As you can see, it has almost all the fields filled out and it did a pretty good job. It has the patient name, the patient address. This is real data that it extracted from these fields. There is one exception here. Patient date of birth must be a valid date. What it did, for some reason, it picked up an extra 7. Maybe there was a smudge or something on the document. So what I'm going to do is I can overwrite it right now. I don't need to send this to an exception because I know the data is right. It's just an extra field. So I'm going to hit the backspace and now it's fine. You can see it turned white. It gets rid of the like the faded yellow color and shows white to show that I by hand updated it. And this looks good. So right now I can go down to the bottom. I can complete this workflow and save. What that'll do is move it out of this workflow, Pharmacy 1, and move it to Webinar Pharmacy 2. Now, I didn't really explain earlier, but Webinar Pharmacy 2 is more of the approval process. This is where maybe a manager will look at it and make sure everything is done right and just decide if this is going to move out to real data and be exported. So they're going to open it up here. You can see there's different metadata here. They do have access to the original metadata, and there it is, and the corrected data. And you can see it was done by hand because it's a different color. And they can double check, make sure everything looks good. And if they're happy, they can go down to their metadata here. And they could say approved, yes. Maybe add a note, and then put in their name. So Jeff K approved it. And now they're going to complete the workflow. They can add a comment and save. At this point, it leaves this workflow. Now, if you remember earlier, I showed you some of the options, and one of them was when a workflow is complete, we could move it to a fax user. And that's what happens. After Webinar Pharmacy 2, that document was moved to just a standard RightFax user. And that user, all it does is dump the file and the metadata to a folder on the computer. So I'm going to show you right here. So if I go here, we'll see there it is. And here's the workflow values. So let's take a look. This was saved in an XML or XSL format. In this case, it's XML. And it has all the data. So there it is, the case type, appointment date confirmed. That was the check boxes, so they were confirmed. The details of the injury, the MRI, all the information is here. Now remember, this could be CSV, could be tab separated, any format you need. Well, maybe your application needs to import this data into it. So it's customizable, it's pretty nice. There's the second workflow, Webinar Pharmacy 2 with the approved. This could be done separately. In this case, I combined it all and then who approved it. So all your metadata now is in a separate file. Pretty nice. I'm going to close this up, minimize this, and let's go back to our fax util and let's look at the exception, the one that came in here, 503. So let's take a look. And you'll know right away because when I go into it and I slide this down, there'll be a red. There it is. Date of consultation must be a valid date. It knows right away it's not a valid date. It's missing the year. Now, I don't know the year, so this is an exception. I can't by hand put it in because I have no idea what year this was done, and I wouldn't have a right to do it unless I knew it. So I will say exception. Save. Now it goes to a different workflow, the webinar exception. And there it is. Now who's ever responsible for monitoring the exception workflows can go in, look at it, look at the original metadata, and act on it. Maybe their job would be to contact this person, get that data that is incorrect, which is down here, and fix it. So at this point, they would maybe call that person or the doctor or the pharmacy, whoever it was, and get maybe it was 2021. Do it. They can do save. They can save and keep, or they can complete, and this way we'll complete. They can add a comment and save. And it's gone. And this can be then exported back out, just like we did before, to the CSV file or the XML file, and the data can be used to import into a third-party app or anything you want. So that's your basic workflows. Pretty powerful. As I mentioned, it'll work with just about any kind of form. You do need to know the form beforehand and set up your fields, but as long as you have the forms and you know there's a certain form you receive, it's going to work great. So next we'll go through some of the new features that are now part of RightFax 20.2 and 21.2. So let's start by going into some of the new API-based connectors for Epic and Allscripts. The way we get to it is we go into the RightFax Web Admin tool. And as you can see, I can just click on Web Admin from my website here. And it does use AD integration and pass-through, so it knows who I am. And see my initial is JE, so it's using my login credentials from my desktop to pass right through. And as you can see, we have our Web Admin, which is just a web-based administration tool that can be used with the web EFM, the thick client EFM, Enterprise Fax Manager. You can use either one. I still like to use the thick client on my desktop. I find it just a little quicker and a little bit more full-featured, but it's getting there. It's almost at the point where it's full-featured. So let's get into this. So let's show the system and integrations. And this is brand new, starting with 20.2 and 21.2, where we have our configure Epic and configure Allscripts. So this is all that has to be done on the RightFax side to integrate with those two EMRs. There is a couple of configuration steps that have to be done on the EMR side, but it's pretty straightforward, and your Epic administrators or Allscripts administrators can definitely get through that pretty quick, and it's a pretty seamless and quick integration. And later during the demo, I have some screenshots on the slides, and we'll go through that. Also now, everything in version 20.x uses encryption between client and server. So there is now a TLS and SSL certificate settings here. You have a self-signing tool here. You can also import your own certificate if you want to use it. And that's just for web-based. And then all the thick clients that are talking between RightFax and any servers, so any clients and servers, are also using a secure encrypted connection. Also, what's new is the user administrator now has a default password. It's not the most secure password, it is the word password, but it is not defaulted to no password anymore. So that's the EMR integrations. Next thing I'd like to show is the new web-based fax util, which, unlike the web-based fax manager, I find the web util to be full-featured and a great replacement for the thick client. So if I go into the fax util web here, you'll see it. Again, it uses AD pass-through, so there's my name right there, my DID number, and they did a pretty good job of emulating the thick client. So pretty straightforward. I have my folders here. I want to view a fax, double-click. Comes up pretty quick in its own viewer. The viewer has all the tools that the thick client has, including zoom in, zoom out, rotates, annotations, rubber stamps. It really emulates the thick client exactly. Also, just like the thick client, and new with this version, is the ability, if you have either delegate rights or you're a full administrator, to open up other users. And now you'll get a list of all your users, kind of like the admin mode in the thick client. So you have the ability to move around and go to any user or group you have rights to. We also have the ability to do a thumbnail view. To do the thumbnail view, we will have to pick a fax that has multiple pages. So let's work our way down here and see. Yeah, here's one that's a cover plus one. So I'm going to go into this fax here. And by default, I don't know if the thumbnail view is on. I think it might be off. Oh, in this case, it is on. I apologize. See there, the thumbnail view. To turn it off, you would click here. Okay, we'll close out of here. Also, I wanted to show you what it looks like to create a new fax. So you click the new fax button right here on the upper left, and you'll get a pop-up. The pop-up, as I mentioned earlier, is full-featured, so you have the ability to do all the things you could do in the thick client. So you have the ability to obviously put in a fax number, and what it does is as you start to type, it tries to find a match in your phone book. So these are all the numbers in my phone book that start with 2 and 2. I can pick my own here, and it populates the field. So my name, my voice number, company name, the billing code fields here are pre-populated from before. I can add my attachments by dropping a file, which is new in this version. I can also add a library document or a standard file to browse for a file. Here's where I can choose my cover sheet and do a preview. And the preview is pretty nice, so you can make sure that you're sending the proper cover sheet. And as I open up the other field, you'll see all the features that we have in the thick client is now available in the web client. Let me slide that down, get a look at that. So here's where you can do your copies, different conversion settings, and under settings you have a lot of fields here to what to do before during sending a fax. So you can do a delay send, you can do a certified delivery, automatic deletions. So as I mentioned, it is full featured, and I would recommend going forward that any upgrades to 20.x or greater, you start to use the web client and not worry about a thick client. It's just much easier. You don't have to worry about updating desktops. You don't have to worry about pushing out software or uninstalling old versions and reinstalling new. So now when you upgrade RightFax, all you're doing is either updating the URL to point to the new system, maybe doing a DNS redirect, but nothing has to change on any desktops, which is great, makes it much easier. All right, there's a couple other new features I'd like to show you. We have some security enhancements. So if I go into the Fax Manager and I go into the sync module, so if I go to services and I go to my RightFax sync module here, you'll see when I go into sources and destination, new, create one. I'll call it test for now. I'm just creating my test AD container. I'll also create here's the new features actually. So I can create just a standard OpenText RightFax destination, which I will, and this is all the same. But what's new is, I'll drop that down again, so is the LDAP, the OKTA source. That's new, and I'm pretty sure that's used for a lot of things like Google Cloud platforms, Microsoft Azure. A lot of these platforms now are using different kind of authentication, including OAuth, and we do support that.